My family ambushed me for my sister. I sold my house, exposed the pattern, reclaimed my life. I gripped my water glass tighter, knuckles whitening as Marissa's words hung in the air between us. "So next week I'll be moving into your place," she said with a casual smile, as if announcing she was switching to almond milk or taking up jogging. "Just until I figure things out." The champagne popped open beside me, my father beaming as he poured the bubbling liquid into crystal flutes I'd never seen before. My mother's china, the set she saved for Thanksgiving and Christmas, gleamed under the chandelier light. The table arrangement should have been my first clue something was happening. Marissa seated at the head of the table, the formal settings, the champagne chilling. This wasn't Sunday dinner. It was an ambush. "I've already started packing," Marissa continued, accepting a flute from Dad with a gracious nod. "It shouldn't take more than a day to get everything moved in." My parents exchanged pleased glances across the table, nodding along as if this was the most reasonable plan in the world, as if my consent was merely a formality, already given. "To new beginnings," my father said, raising his glass. Everyone lifted theirs in response. Everyone except me. The garage boxes made sense now. 3 days ago, I'd found them stacked against the wall, oversized plastic tubs labeled Marissa's winter clothes and Marissa's books. When I texted her about them, she'd brushed it off. "Just temporary storage," she said, just until she found more space in her apartment. I should have known. Just like I should have known what it meant when I confronted my parents about paying Marissa's rent for the 3rd time this year. "She's going through a rough patch," Mom had said, waving away my concerns. "That's what family does. We help each other." I heard my mother's voice from last week. The phone call I wasn't supposed to overhear while waiting in her kitchen. "Eden is so lonely in that big house," she'd told Aunt Sarah. "She needs her sister's company. It's perfect timing, really, perfect timing." As if my life existed solely to accommodate Marissa's latest crisis. I set my water glass down carefully, reaching for my purse on the floor beside me. The trembling in my hands had nothing to do with nervousness and everything to do with fury. "Why do you look so serious?" Marissa laughed, her eyes darting briefly to our parents. "This is good news for both of us. You get company, and I get to save on rent for a while." My fingers closed around the manila envelope I'd brought, the one I'd almost left in the car, thinking tonight wasn't the right time. But there was no right time with my family. There was only their time, their plans, their expectations. The tremor in my hands steadied as I placed the envelope on the table. "Actually," I said, my voice calmer than I felt, "I have news, too." My parents' expressions shifted instantly. My mother's smile faltered, eyes narrowing slightly. My father lowered his champagne glass, forehead creasing with concern. The change was subtle but unmistakable. The united front forming against the daughter who wasn't following the script. "What kind of news?" My mother's tone carried a warning. "Don't ruin this. Don't be difficult." I felt the weight of the familiar labels hovering in the air. Selfish, difficult, uncaring. The stakes of defiance were clear. Disagree and become the family villain. Again, looking at their expectant faces, I realized this pattern had defined my entire life. Marissa takes. I give. My parents enforce the transaction. The roles never change. The lines never shift. Until now. I placed the manila envelope in the center of the table, my fingers lingering on the edge. The room fell silent, my family's anticipation hanging heavy in the air. "What's that?" My mother's voice carried a hint of irritation, as if my interruption was derailing an already settled plan. "This," I said, carefully withdrawing the papers inside, "is the sale agreement for my house. I sold it last week. I have 30 days left before I move." The silence that followed was absolute. Marissa's champagne glass slipped from her fingers, shattering against the hardwood floor. No one moved to clean it up. My father's mouth opened and closed like a fish suddenly finding itself on dry land. "You what?" Marissa finally whispered. I flipped through my phone, pulling up the Pinterest board I'd discovered this morning. "Interesting timing, isn't it? While you were planning to move in, Mom and Aunt Sarah were already designing your future bedroom in my house." I turned the screen toward them, displaying their meticulous board labeled Marissa's New Room. My throat tightened as I watched recognition flash across their faces. 9 years of saving every possible penny, working overtime, sacrificing vacations and new clothes, all to afford that house, my dream home. And to them, it was just another resource to be redirected to Marissa. My father stood abruptly, towering over me. "You can just cancel the sale," he said, waving his hand dismissively. "These things have cooling-off periods." My mother rose too, resting her hand on his arm. "Eden, we already promised Marissa she could stay as long as she needed. You can't possibly expect her to find a place in 30 days. Actually, Aunt Sarah piped up from the end of the table. "We were going to move most of her things next Tuesday while you were at work, just to make it easier for everyone." The coordinated betrayal stole my breath. I glanced at Dorothy, my mother's oldest friend, sitting uncomfortably beside Aunt Sarah. She stared fixedly at her plate, avoiding eye contact with everyone. "You can't do this," my father said, his voice hardening. "What about your property taxes coming due? You know I always help with those." The implied threat wasn't subtle. His one annual contribution to my finances dangled now as leverage. "Eden," my mother said softly, her voice taking on the concerned tone she used when discussing unstable people. "I'm worried about you. This kind of impulsive decision-making isn't like you. Are you feeling all right? Have you been taking care of yourself?" I recognized the strategy immediately. If not compliant, then possibly unwell. It was a familiar path in our family dynamic, one that had kept me in line for years. "You did this on purpose," Marissa accused, tears streaming down her face. "You found out I needed a place to stay and sold your house just to spite me." The accusation landed like a physical blow. This was how it always went. My boundaries recast as cruelty, my self-preservation painted as selfishness. For a moment, I considered explaining the truth. The catastrophic roof replacement that drained my savings, the water line break, the heating system failure, the mounting financial pressure that made selling not just advisable but necessary. But what would be the point? They'd already cast me as the villain in this family drama. Why give them more ammunition? "I made this decision for my own reasons," I said instead, keeping my voice steady. "And it's final." "So you're just going to leave your sister homeless?" My mother's voice rose. "After everything we've done for you?" The familiar weight of guilt settled on my shoulders. Everything they'd done for me. The invisible ledger of family obligation that only ever seemed to accumulate in one direction. "Marissa isn't homeless," I pointed out. "She has an apartment, and if that doesn't work, she has your spare bedroom." "That's not the point," my father interjected. "Family helps family, period, anyone." The unspoken remainder of that sentence hung in the air, and you're not being family. "I think," I said carefully, gathering the sale papers back into the envelope, "that we have different definitions of help." Under the table, I felt a gentle squeeze on my hand. Dorothy, still avoiding eye contact with everyone else, whispered so quietly I almost missed it. "Good for you." It was a small validation, but in this moment, it felt monumental. One person in this room didn't see me as selfish or cruel for protecting myself. As I sat there with my family's accusations hanging in the air, I wondered whether I should explain the financial struggles that forced me to sell my beloved home, or simply hold firm without justifying my decision. Would sharing my vulnerability help them understand, or just give them new ammunition to use against me? The first call came Tuesday morning while I was fixing my coffee. Aunt Sarah's name flashed on my phone screen, unusual for a weekday before 9. "Eden, honey, I just talked to your mother." Her voice carried that particular tone, the one reserved for funerals and family scandals. "Is it true you sold your house just to keep Marissa from staying with you?" My coffee sloshed over the rim of my mug, scalding my fingers. "What?" "Marissa called me in tears last night," she continued. "Said you sold your beautiful home out of spite, knowing she needed a place to stay." The burning on my hand faded as a different heat rose in my chest. "That's not what happened. Your sister will be homeless, Eden. I never thought you could be so cruel." The calls continued all day. Uncle Robert, Cousin Jennifer, even my father's golf buddy Chuck, whose connection to this situation escaped me entirely. Each conversation followed the same script. Marissa's desperate situation, my apparent heartlessness, their profound disappointment in me. While preparing dinner, I made the mistake of checking Facebook. Marissa's latest post appeared at the top of my feed. "The hardest lesson in life is learning who truly has your back when times get tough." Family should be forever, not just when it's convenient. 27 sympathetic comments followed, including one from Mom. "We're here for you, sweetheart. Always." The knife in my hand chopped carrots with increasing force. The final blow came Thursday, when my colleague Lisa stopped by my desk, her expression pinched with concern. "I ran into your sister at Starbucks this morning," she said, lowering her voice. "She told me about the house situation. If you need help finding her temporary housing, my church has a program." The carrot pieces on my cutting board splintered under the blade. "What exactly did Marissa tell you?" Lisa shifted uncomfortably. "Just that she's facing homelessness because of some sudden decision you made. She seemed really upset." My jaw tightened so hard it ached. "Thanks for your concern, Lisa. But Marissa isn't homeless. She has an apartment and parents with a 4-bedroom house." After Lisa left, I locked myself in the bathroom stall, hands trembling as I texted my sister, "Stop telling people I'm making you homeless. It's a lie and you know it." Her response arrived instantly. "You're selling the house I was counting on. What would you call it?" The roof replacement came first. $11,000 I hadn't budgeted for when the March storms revealed leaks in 3 different rooms. I emptied my vacation fund and took a small loan, telling myself it was a one-time emergency. Then the water line broke in April, $8,200 for emergency repairs and landscape restoration. I canceled plans to visit my college roommate in Arizona, picked up weekend marketing work for a local realtor, and ate ramen for dinner more nights than I cared to admit. The heating system failure in June was the final blow. $5,000 I simply didn't have. Each night after work, I'd sit at my kitchen table, surrounded by spreadsheets and bank statements, calculating and recalculating figures that refused to balance. The crying started around then, silent tears that came only after midnight, when I was certain no neighbors walking dogs might glance through my windows and see the truth, that the woman they waved to each morning, the one who always appeared composed and capable, was falling apart behind closed doors. My reflection in the bathroom mirror each morning revealed the cost, dark hollows beneath my eyes that concealer couldn't quite hide, collarbones more pronounced against my blouses. When my pants began slipping at the waist, I punched new holes in my belt rather than buy smaller sizes. Temporary situation, temporary solution. While maintaining this facade, I packed my home each evening. 9 years of memories sorted into keep, donate, and trash. Books that once lined entire walls now filled boxes stacked in corners. The wedding photos of friends, the graduation pictures of cousins, the vacation snapshots, all bubble-wrapped and nestled in containers labeled with blue marker. Through it all, I documented everything. Bank statements in chronological order, house repair invoices filed by date and category, text messages screenshotted and saved, a fortress of paper proof against the siege of family fiction. While packing my office bookshelf, I found it, a framed photo I'd almost forgotten. Me, standing on the front porch of this house the day I signed the mortgage papers, keys clutched in my hand, smile threatening to split my face. The realtor had taken it as a surprise, catching the exact moment I realized I'd actually done it, purchased a home entirely on my own. I traced the frame's edge, remembering that feeling, pride without a hint of apology, accomplishment without anyone else's approval attached. I placed it carefully atop the nearest keep box, this tangible reminder of what I built and what no one could diminish. The doorbell rang Saturday afternoon while I was wrapping dishes in newspaper. Through the front window, I spotted my parents' Buick in the driveway, Marissa's red compact behind it. No warning text, no courtesy call. I considered not answering, but the knocking grew more insistent. When I opened the door, they filed in like funeral directors, solemn, judgmental, prepared to manage a difficult situation. Mom spotted the boxes immediately. "You're really going through with this madness." I folded the newspaper around another plate, securing it with tape. "The closing is in 3 weeks. Your sister needs you." Mom's voice rose slightly. "You've always been selfish, but this is beyond understanding." "Your sister needs you." The plate in my hands remained steady, though something shifted inside me. I'd spent my entire life being told what Marissa needed. The words emerged calmer than I felt. "Did anyone ever ask what I need?" Dad cleared his throat. "Eden, be reasonable. I need financial stability. I need to sleep at night without panic attacks about bills. I need to not drain my retirement fund for house repairs I can't afford. I continued wrapping dishes methodically. Unlike past confrontations, I didn't stop what I was doing to give them my full attention. I didn't offer beverages or comfortable seats. I continued my work while they stood awkwardly in my half-packed kitchen. "We're your family," Mom said, voice wavering between anger and disbelief. "Yes, you are. And I've never once asked you for money. Not for college, not for my first apartment, not for this house, and not for the repairs that drained my savings." For once, they had no immediate response. Marissa stared at the floor, unable to meet my eyes. Dad examined the ceiling as if architectural features had suddenly become fascinating. I realized with startling clarity that I no longer needed their approval or understanding. The constant ache for validation I'd carried since childhood had quieted, replaced by something sturdier. When I stood to reach for another stack of plates, I noticed my posture had changed. Shoulders back, spine straight, eyes level with theirs instead of downcast as usual, the physical manifestation of an internal shift. Dorothy arrived that evening with Thai food and 2 bottles of wine. She helped me pack photo albums while sharing stories of her own sister, the one who didn't speak to her for 3 years after Dorothy refused to co-sign a loan. "Family patterns are the hardest to break," she said, carefully wrapping a crystal vase my grandmother left me. "But sometimes breaking them is the only way forward." Monday brought an unexpected text from my colleague Thomas. "Need help moving? Got a truck and strong back. Family often sees us least clearly. Just say when." That afternoon, Barbara, my financial advisor, emailed confirmation of my townhouse application approval. "Based on your financials, this move reduces your housing costs by 42%. The right decision for your long-term security. Call if you need anything else." The contrast struck me as I reviewed these messages over dinner. These people asked what I needed rather than telling me what to give. They offered specific help instead of vague demands. That night, I spread my financial documents across the dining room table: bank statements, repair invoices, property tax assessments, retirement account withdrawals, everything meticulously organized, the complete picture of my financial reality. Tomorrow's family meeting wouldn't be an intervention for me, but a reckoning with facts they'd chosen to ignore. My one advantage remained unspoken. The sales agreement included a 30-day rent-back clause. For a month after closing, I could stay in the house while finalizing my townhouse purchase, breathing room they didn't know I had. At exactly 7 o'clock Tuesday evening, the doorbell rang. When I opened it, I found not just my parents and Marissa on the porch, but Aunt Sarah, Uncle Robert, and my cousin Jennifer standing behind them. A family firing squad assembled for execution. I stood at the head of my dining room table, a position that felt foreign yet right. The manila folder in my hands held every financial statement, every bill, every painful reminder of why I had to sell my home. My fingers no longer trembled as I opened it. "Before anyone says another word, I need you all to see something." My voice carried a steadiness I didn't entirely recognize. The family gathering looked larger than I anticipated. My parents, Marissa, Uncle William, Aunt Sarah, and my support team, Dorothy, Barbara, and Thomas. I laid out the documents methodically, arranging them in chronological order: bank statements, emergency fund withdrawals, contractor invoices. Each paper told part of the story I'd kept hidden. "This is the roof replacement from last spring." I slid the $11,200 invoice toward the center where everyone could see it. The 30-year shingles only lasted 22. Insurance covered nothing. Uncle William adjusted his glasses, leaning forward with a frown that cut deep lines across his forehead. "Waterline repair, $8,200. Another paper joined the first. When the city updated the main line, it revealed my connection was deteriorating. No warning, no payment plan offered. My mother shifted in her seat, but remained uncharacteristically silent. Heating system replacement, $5,000. The third major bill completed my trinity of home ownership nightmares. The energy efficiency rebate covered barely a quarter of the cost. I maintained direct eye contact as I spoke, something I rarely managed in family confrontations before. Barbara nodded almost imperceptibly from her seat near the window, encouraging me to continue. "My emergency fund is gone." I placed my bank statement on top, the balance painfully clear. My financial advisor recommended selling while the market is still hot rather than risking a forced sale later when I might be underwater. Marissa's chair scraped against the hardwood as she stood abruptly. This is creative accounting, Eden. You've always been good with numbers when it suits you. Her voice carried the familiar accusatory edge. You're just trying to avoid your family responsibilities. Uncle William, whose judgment I'd feared since childhood, surprised me by turning toward my sister. Marissa, what's your current employment situation? Last I heard you were between jobs. The unexpected redirection left Marissa fumbling. I'm exploring opportunities. The job market is complicated right now. My mother jumped in. William, this isn't about employment. Family duty exists regardless of finances. Eden has always had that beautiful house with all that extra space. Speaking of space, Aunt Sarah interjected, her reading glasses perched on her nose as she examined my heating bill. Why can't Marissa stay with you and Roger? You have that guest room you just redecorated. The conversation shifted like a current, pulling away from me and swirling around the room as family members began questioning the arrangement I'd endured my entire adult life. Dorothy cleared her throat. I've known this family for 20 years. Eden bought her house without any family financial support. Meanwhile, I've watched Marissa receive help with rent, car payments, and credit card bills. Repeatedly, her voice carried the weight of long observation. The pattern has been clear to everyone except those closest to it. Barbara straightened her blazer before speaking. As Eden's financial advisor, I can tell you that enabling financial dependency ultimately harms both parties. The one giving depletes their resources, while the receiver never develops crucial life skills. Thomas, sitting quietly until now, leaned forward. My brother lived with my parents until he was 42. They paid his bills, made his appointments, solved his problems. When they passed, he had no idea how to function. He lost their house within a year because he never learned to manage money. He glanced at my parents. Sometimes the most loving thing is to stop rescuing someone. The room fell unusually quiet as these outside perspectives penetrated the family mythology we'd operated under for decades. Uncle William broke the silence. Eden, why didn't you share these financial struggles sooner? I hesitated, the question catching me off guard. Should I maintain the privacy and independence that had served as my armor for years, or would opening up to select family members create the support system I never thought possible? Before I could answer, my father shifted in his chair, eyes fixed on the hardwood floor. It was the first time I could remember him sitting through a family discussion without dominating it. My mother's rigid posture gradually softened, her hands now resting open on the table instead of clenched in her lap. Marissa stood suddenly, grabbing her purse. This is ridiculous. You're all acting like I'm some kind of parasite. When no one jumped to her defense, she stormed toward the door. The slam echoed through the house as she left. Uncle William waited for the reverberations to fade before speaking again. I think it's time we had a family financial planning session. For everyone. He looked pointedly toward my parents, including Marissa. My mother's eyes glistened with unshed tears, but for once, they weren't being weaponized against me. My father reached for her hand across the table, his face unreadable but his silence speaking volumes. For the first time in a family confrontation, I wasn't the one left feeling like I'd done something wrong. I arranged the last of my kitchen glasses into a box, wrapping each one in newspaper with methodical precision. My final week in my 30-day countdown, and the house already felt hollow. Memories peeling away with each item packed. The doorbell rang. I checked my watch. Right on time. My parents were nothing if not punctual when they had an agenda. I opened the door to find not just my parents, but Marissa, too, standing on my porch like a united front. My mother clutched her purse with white knuckles. My father's smile appeared rehearsed. Eden, honey, my mother said, stepping inside without waiting for an invitation. We've been talking, and we think we've found the perfect solution. A compromise, my father added, his voice carrying that false cheerfulness he reserved for difficult conversations. Marissa followed them in, her eyes darting around my half-packed living room before settling on me with a practiced look of gratitude. I really appreciate you hearing us out. They arranged themselves on my couch, the only piece of furniture not yet wrapped in moving blankets, while I remained standing. The power dynamic wasn't lost on me. We know selling the house is your decision, my mother began, punctuating her words with a nervous laugh. But instead of Marissa moving in with you, What if you helped her get her own place? My father nodded enthusiastically, while carefully avoiding any mention of actual numbers, just a loan to get her started. With your success, it would hardly affect you. Unlike me, Marissa interjected, her voice soft and rehearsed. Some people just have bad luck, you know? The implication hung heavy in the air between us. You're successful, she's struggling, you owe her this. My mother leaned forward, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. Eden, the family has always stuck together. If you can't help your sister just this once— She trailed off, the threat clear, cut Marissa off, and I cut myself off from the family. I walked to the dining room table where I'd laid out several documents. They watched me, confusion replacing their certainty. I'm meeting with my lender tomorrow, I said, picking up a pre-approval letter for a townhouse downtown. The monthly payment will be nearly 40% less than my current mortgage. I handed the letter to my father, whose eyes widened at the numbers. Selling this house isn't just about Marissa. It's about rebuilding my emergency savings after 3 major home repairs drained them. It's about reducing my financial stress. I took a deep breath. It's about finally prioritizing my financial health. My mother started to speak, but I held up my hand. I can't support Marissa financially, I continued, but I can help her support herself. I pulled a business card from my pocket and held it out to Marissa. She stared at it without taking it. Our marketing department has an entry-level position opening next week. The starting salary would cover rent on a 1-bedroom apartment. I spoke to HR yesterday, and they'd be willing to interview you. Marissa's mouth opened, then closed. For once, she seemed genuinely speechless. This isn't charity, I added. It's an opportunity. Whether you take it is your choice. My father stood abruptly, moving toward the window where bare hooks showed where family photos once hung. Eden, be reasonable. Marissa needs— No, I interrupted, walking to the coffee table where I'd placed a manila folder. This is what being reasonable looks like. I opened the folder and pulled out a spreadsheet, placing it on the table between us. The itemized list contained every financial gift my parents had given Marissa over the past 5 years. Car payments, rent supplements, credit card bailouts. The total at the bottom, circled in bright red, made my mother gasp. I compiled this from the conversations you've had in front of me, I said quietly. I suspect the actual total is higher. My father picked up the paper, his forehead creasing as he studied the numbers. This isn't love, I said quietly. It's dependence, and it's hurting both of you. My father opened his mouth to object, then fell silent, his eyes fixed on the spreadsheet. We just wanted to help her, my mother whispered, tears welling in her eyes. The best help is teaching someone to stand on their own, I replied, my voice steady despite the hammering in my chest. You taught me that once, remember? When I wanted to quit college because it was too hard? The memory hung between us, my father refusing to let me move back home when calculus overwhelmed, me insisting I find a tutor instead. We're doing you no favors by making life too easy, he'd said then. Strange how principles change when applied to different daughters. The silence stretched, broken only by the sound of packing tape from the box I'd abandoned when they arrived. Finally, my father put his arm around my mother's shoulders. We should go, he said quietly. They walked to the door, my mother not quite meeting my eyes. Marissa hesitated, looking back at the business card still in my hand. I don't need your charity job, she said, but there was less conviction in her voice than usual. I placed the card on the entryway table. It's not charity, it's opportunity. She turned away, but as she followed my parents out, I caught her slip the card into her purse when she thought I wasn't looking. The door closed behind them. I stood in my half-empty living room, listening to their car start and pull away. The silence felt different now. Not hollow, but open, expansive. I sank onto the couch, running my hand over the familiar fabric. Tomorrow it went into storage until I moved into the townhouse. 9 years of memories in this house, and now an uncertain future lay ahead. I felt both liberated and isolated, triumphant and alone. The family dinner next month loomed in my mind. Would they even still want me there? Had this confrontation permanently altered our relationships? The answering machine light blinked with 3 new messages, probably more relatives calling to weigh in. I ignored it, focusing instead on the business card Marissa took. One small step, perhaps the first of many. I stood in the center of my downtown loft, savoring the space around me. Sunlight streamed through the windows, warming the hardwood floors beneath my bare feet. 3 months ago, this place felt foreign, a compromise rather than a choice. Now it felt like the home I never knew I needed. Another box checked off the budget, I told myself, updating my financial tracking app. My mortgage payment appeared in green, a full 30% less than what I paid for the Craftsman. Barbara's weekly check-ins had transformed what was once my greatest source of anxiety into a structured ritual I actually looked forward to. The kitchen island held my newest purchase, a professional-grade camera that would have remained a distant wish in my old financial reality. My first photography class started tomorrow evening, the course catalog still open on my tablet. I ran my fingers over the camera's textured grip, permission to create rather than just survive. My phone buzzed with a reminder, Sunday dinner at my parents'. I felt the familiar tightening in my shoulders, then consciously released it. These dinners had changed, just as I had. Later, I stepped through my parents' front door, carrying a bottle of wine rather than my usual tension headache. Dad greeted me with a hug that felt genuine instead of perfunctory. "Eden, come see what your sister brought," he said, his voice carrying none of the comparative undertones that once filled our interactions. In the dining room, Marissa arranged flowers in a simple vase. She looked up, her smile reaching her eyes. "They gave me my first business cards today," she said, pulling one from her pocket. "Assistant marketing coordinator. Sounds fancy for someone who mostly makes coffee runs, but I'm learning so much." She handed me the card proudly, without the defensive edge that once colored her accomplishments. My mother appeared in the doorway, carrying a casserole that wasn't placed strategically closer to Marissa's place setting. "Tell us more about the social media campaign you mentioned last week," Mom said, looking directly at Marissa. Then she turned to me. "And Eden, how was your photography class?" I blinked, still adjusting to the novelty of balanced attention. As we ate, I noticed my father asking thoughtful questions of both daughters, not just fawning over Marissa's every word. 1 week later, laughter filled my loft as Dorothy raised her glass. "To homes that shelter us and boundaries that protect us," she toasted. Around my coffee table sat Thomas, Barbara, Uncle William, and me, my chosen family, alongside the blood relative who surprised me most. Dorothy presented me with a frame containing 2 photos, me signing my original mortgage papers 9 years ago, and me holding the keys to this townhouse. "2 brave beginnings," she said softly. "2 very different women," I added, recognizing how much I'd changed. The following weekend found Marissa and me at my kitchen table, surrounded by spreadsheets and calculator apps. So if I put away 15% of each paycheck, I could have first and last month's rent by January, she said, chewing her lip as she ran the numbers again. Our parents sat on my sofa, watching this scene with a mix of pride and regret. "We should have done this years ago," Mom admitted quietly. "We thought we were helping, but we were hurting both of you in different ways." Dad nodded, his eyes revealing the difficult journey of unlearning decades of enabling behavior. As I watched Marissa calculate her budget with determination I'd never seen before, I wondered about the fine line between helping and enabling those we love. Is it ever possible to find the perfect balance between supporting family and maintaining healthy boundaries? Or must we sometimes allow others to struggle so they can truly grow?